an original MCM production.
Acknowledge some people who are here today. We have Alderwoman Coggs, who is my alderwoman. Is she here or is she gone? Where is she at? Okay. Next we have State Senator Mandela Barnes. What is it? State Rep. Well, it must be coming. Anyway, we have State Representative Mandela Barnes. Oh. And they are visiting here from the Philippines, and we welcome you to Community Brainstorming. Thank you. Next we have Mr. Fred Royal, who is the president of the NAACP. We have State Rep Latanya Johnson. We have our board member, County Supervisor Khalif Rainey. Is Mayor Barrett here? Okay. Good morning, Mayor Barrett. And the last member of our panel, Milwaukee County District Attorney, John Chisholm. He is a legend.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jordan. I follow a couple simple rules in life, and high in that order is when Dr. Malone calls, I come. So I was privileged to get the invitation, and as Dr. Malone mentioned, so Thursday, I had an absolutely unique opportunity, and that opportunity was to sit down with about 60 law enforcement and criminal justice professionals and have a conversation with the President of the United States. The group was called Law Enforcement Leaders to Reduce Incarceration. And why is that significant? That is significant because I was sitting with the police chiefs of New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Dallas, Portland, Miami, all of whom have this obligation to create a more safe community. And every single one of them was also saying that they were equally committed, even during a time that many of them are experiencing an uptick in violent crime. All of them were standing up publicly and talking to the president about the absolute necessity to reduce incarceration. And that's a critical moment in time. And I'll tell you, it was followed the very next day by the Senate voting on a bill in a bipartisan manner to reduce mandatory minimum sentences in the federal system. A couple things. I also currently, for the last 2.5 years, have been part of the Harvard Executive Session on Community Corrections. It's chaired by Bruce Western, Jeremy Travis from John Jay University. I've also been the chair of the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. And I say these things not to burnish an apple, but simply to tell you one thing, and that is that what is happening in Milwaukee right now is recognized nationally for what we're trying to do and how we're going about doing it. And we're also, and you ask the question, why would you have a prosecutor on a panel of experts that is talking about community corrections? Everybody at this table is an expert at community corrections, and why are they asking a prosecutor to sit on that panel? And the answer is very simple, that prosecutors play a vital role in addressing a universal vision of how we're going to address both public safety and social justice at the same time. We've had this effort underway in Milwaukee for a long time. And certainly it was spearheaded initially by Senator Taylor. And quite frankly, I'll just tell you point blank, I wish that we had just completed our work back in 2009 and got to it as a state. We would have been in a much better position than we are today if we had simply adopted the principles that were coming out of the Justice Reinvestment Initiative, which was a basic concept which said adapt practices that are known to work to reduce the number of people that are coming into your system, and with the people that are in the system, do the right thing with them while they're here. In other words, address the problems that bring them into the system in the first place. Now, I was fortunate also because I had a partner. His name was Tom Reed. He's the first public defender in Milwaukee. And most people around the country, and I'll just tell you this is true, working with many prosecutors and examining many systems, you know, public defenders and prosecutors are cats and dogs, right? They fight with each other all the time. I'll tell you that the relationship that has developed between the public defender's office and the DA's office has been one of mutual respect. And yes, as Lena indicated, sometimes we have to fight, and we all understand that. But because of that relationship, Tom and I were able to go out to the National Institute of Corrections in about 2008. We were able to secure the interest of the National Institute of Corrections, and we began implementing evidence-based decision-making right here in Milwaukee. We were one of only 3 major cities in the entire country to be selected to do that. And since that time, we've committed to it wholeheartedly, and that means everybody. That means everybody that is in a position to make change has accepted their responsibility to make that change. And what does that mean? So certainly it means that you have to have the buy-in of the county executive, and we've had complete buy-in from the county executive and the willingness to make changes that have affected change. You have to have the buy-in of the mayor, and we've had the complete buy-in of the mayor, the police chief. You've got to have the head of the House of Corrections, you have to have the public defender, the chief judge, the head of the supervisor of the House of Corrections. You have to have community members that are actively engaged. Kit McNally has been a long-standing member, and she's a voice of the community to push us. So why is this significant? It's significant because, again, if we're going to change what has occurred, not just in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin, but throughout the country, we have to develop a new vision for what public safety really means. The recent report that came out from the National Academy of Sciences, if you haven't seen it, please read it. It addresses the historic disproportionate use of incarceration as a public safety response. And it points out that we've gotten ourselves in a position that is no longer sustainable. So there's a couple of principles that we have to follow if we're going to address that come right out of the report. The first one is parsimony. What is parsimony? Parsimony says that you only use the leverage of the criminal justice system to the extent needed to affect the change that is needed. Use the limited amount of state power that's needed to affect the change. Proportionality, that means that you only use, you use it so that in effect the punishment fits the crime or the response fits the need. So it's proportionality. We haven't always used proportionality in this system. Third, and I think most important, that's reflected in the changing way that we're going about community corrections, it's the concept of citizenship. Citizenship. I had the opportunity to go over with Vera and John Jay to Germany, tour the German correction system. When you walk into a German prison, what do you see? You see people dressed just like us. They get to wear their clothes while they're in prison. Each of them is constitutionally entitled to their own cell. They have communal kitchens. And a vast majority of the systems are what are called open prison systems. They can go out during the day and they can receive treatment, they can get job training, they can get employment, they can do those things. It is dramatically different than what we do here. And as a consequence, they view their job differently than we often view our job here. The fundamental issue in the United States is that we approach crimes and those who commit crimes as an offense to us personally. It makes us angry, and we want to punish people. And so we've adopted a system that punishes people. And it's reflected in how we treat people when they come into our system, and oftentimes how we treat them when they come out of the system. And it degrades the concept of citizenship. Finally, it's a concept of social justice, and we have to get back to an understanding, if you look at all those previous principles, that we as a community, as a nation, have to change the way we're approaching crimes. It's a difficult thing to do. Since 1975, we have gone on a incarceration binge that has to be changed. It makes us 9 times, you know, we have 25% of the world's prison population in the United States alone. We have to address that. We have to do it in a context that keeps our community safe. We all acknowledge that we have experienced times where there are upticks in violence. And let me address that issue as well. And that is, we are currently engaged in a process here, just as we were selected to be the seed site for the National Institute of Corrections, and that gets us the attention throughout the country for the work we've done here. We're also in the process of trying to secure a MacArthur grant, which is called the Safety Justice Challenge. The MacArthur Foundation is willing to put $2.5 million a year into the cities that they select. We're one of only 20 out of 160 cities that have made the first cut. They're going to bring it down to 10. If you get those 10, the challenge is this: you have to redesign the way you use your jails. You have to dramatically change the way you use your jails. And we have to do that at the exact same time that we're engaged in the efforts to reduce the way that we use our prison system. And it is absolutely critical while we're doing that we develop a new concept of what community corrections is. We've engaged in a process that has funneled people into the criminal justice system for 20 or 30 years now. What I suggest is simply this: let's redesign the system to create an irrigation system. An irrigation system instead of a funnel. The funnel takes people and puts them in there, and it turns this process on that eventually results in jail, prison, spit back into the community, back into jail, back into prison, and the cycles go on and on. If we develop an irrigation system, it means that we have to identify the factors that lead people into our system early and make the right decisions with them as soon as we have the opportunity to do that. Here's an example, again, that is nationally recognized in what we're doing here, and what are one of the biggest factors that lead people into the criminal justice system. Mental health, trauma. Now with mental health, I'm going to make that a big category. Mental health, it also involves substance addiction, alcohol addiction, and it involves youthful offenders. And I say mental health because we've come to understand that youthful offenders think differently than adults. They think differently, and they think differently particularly, and all people think differently, if I go to the second category that we have to address as a community and as a nation, and that is trauma. The people who are exposed to trauma, particularly as children, adverse childhood experiences, the science on it, the data on it is overwhelming. It's not even disputable. It is not disputable. People exposed to trauma will make decisions that almost inevitably harm themselves and harm others. We've seen this in our community time and again. We look at the data related to homicides, and the difference between a victim and an offender in their history is almost insignificant. We as a community have to address this, and we've started one incredibly important initiative, which is connected to community corrections and everything else as well, and that's the Sojourner Family Peace Center. It's a brand new concept that says, let's take our victims and their entire family and treat their exposure to violence as a public health issue. Let's change what we're doing. When children are exposed to violence, it changes the way they behave, it changes the way they perceive the world. One of our biggest challenges right now is that it's often rational for young people to think that they have to pick up a gun. And that's the calculus we have to change. There's no question. Again, I go back to the original point. You had the most experienced, the toughest, the longest serving police chiefs, sheriffs, U.S. attorneys, and prosecutors in the country standing before the president and saying, we want to do things differently. We need help. We need help to change the way we've been doing things. Yes, we're going to still address the issues of violent crime, but we want to do it in a way that's different, that changes what's happened in the last 20 or 30 years, and we want to do it in a way that actually reduces incarceration. The only way we can do that is if we redevelop and recommit to the true concept of community corrections, and that means that we have to stop over-relying on our prisons and our jails and start actually resourcing the vast resources that have been mentioned here today as ways of safely and accountably taking care of the people, both our victims and our offenders that come into our system, and do that in a comprehensive way. I'll just finish by saying this. Thursday was a pretty busy, I think every day is busy with the President of the United States. He spent over an hour talking to us at the White House, over an hour of his precious time. And I will tell you this, I have never heard anybody that understood the issues and could articulate them better than the President of the United States. He gets these issues. And he, and I will tell you, other law enforcement professionals throughout the country, including the chief here in Milwaukee, Ed Flynn is part of Law Enforcement Leaders to Reduce Incarceration. We're all committed to engaging in a process that changes the way we address these problems in our community. And we're looking forward to a future that's safer, that's more prosperous, and is healthier for all of us. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, D.A. Chisholm. Real quick, we want Mayor Barrett. Mayor Barrett has something to say. He said it won't take long, but he needs to put his input out to you. Thank you, Mayor Barrett.
Thank you. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to stop by, and because this is such an important issue for the city as well, and I've had the honor in my career to serve at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level. And I've loved all the different positions, but at the federal level, you're sort of flying an airplane at 35,000 feet. At the state level, it's 4,000 to 5,000 feet. At the city, we are in the trenches because many of the people, most of the people who are affected by this conversation today are people who live in the city of Milwaukee. And so this is not a theoretical issue for us. This is a real issue as to what we do with people coming out of our penal system who are going to come back to the places where they grew up. And this is real stuff. And what we've tried to do is we've tried to, and working very closely with Earl Buford in particular because of the close relationship between the Milwaukee Area Workforce Investment Board and the city, do everything we can to no theory. I mean, I shouldn't say no theory. Our work is very gritty. It's how do we get people working when they come out of the system. That's what we're trying to do. And we've done a couple of things, and if we had more resources, and I'm not here, of course we'd like more resources, but I just want you to know what the approach is that we're taking. The approach that we are taking is we have a transitional jobs program. And part of this is based on two things. One is my personal experience growing up, that the best way to look for a job is from a job. And the second is you need positive momentum in your life, that you're more appealing if you've got a job. So in our Department of Public Works, in our Department of City Development, at our port, in our Department of Neighborhood Services, with the strong support of Alderwoman Coggs and Alderman Stamper and other members of the Common Council, we're putting people to work. 100 people, we'd like to put more people to work, but we put them to work for 6 months. And then we say, okay, you've got the skills that you need. The other thing that we're doing, and Earl Buford has heard me tell this story a gazillion times, I call it the ships passing in the night phenomenon, but I don't know if Earl's ever heard this part. I talk about a day when earlier in my time as mayor, when I was at a community meeting, and it was in a basement of a church, and people were hot. And that room was, of course, this room. This was the room. When I'm always talking about the ships passing the night, I'm talking about this room. It was a community brainstorming event. And we were talking about driver's license. We were talking about child support, the barriers to employment. And I left this room. And it was a day probably like today. And I went to the far northwest part of the city. And I toured a plant. As I was leaving the plant, the manager of the plant said, "We are so frustrated because we can't find workers." And that was right after I left here, where the tension was so great because people couldn't find work. And I thought, this is just two ships passing in the night. We have to find a way to bring them together. Again, no theory, just gritty, real stuff. And that's where Earl stepped in, and we sat down and we talked about it, because the challenge we have is people, and some of them are coming out of the institutions, some of them are not coming out of the institutions, but they go through what I call generic job training programs, and they get to the end, and there's no job. And then I talk to employers who hire people from generic job programs, and they say they can't do the job. So what we decided we would do in the city, the Milwaukee Area Workforce Investment Board, Milwaukee Area Technical College, and sometimes with Waukesha County Technical College, work directly with employees. And I'll use CNC operators as an example. A CNC operator is someone who's working with sort of a computerized system, but it's a factory job. They tell us we need 10 CNC operators. We work with Earl and get people from our community right here and train them for those jobs. Not generic jobs, for those jobs. And sometimes we train them right in the plant. Sometimes we train them at Milwaukee Area Technical College. And as frustrating as this may be today, I would invite anyone here to come with us when we go to a graduation from one of those ceremonies, because you want to see changed lives. And it's an amazing thing. Sometimes it's 8 people, sometimes it's 18 people, sometimes it's 30 people. But one of the best parts of this job for me is sitting through one of those graduations where at the end of the graduation, the employer hands them the offer of employment.
All right.
And that's what we have to do, and that's what we're trying to do, working with the Milwaukee Area Workforce Investment Board, is to be the go-to place for employers to say, we need workers, this is where we're going to go. And we'll train them, and this includes a large cohort of people who are coming out of the institutions. So again, this is something that's very important, and I think you can see here, and by the number of people in this audience, that this is, again, a important real-world issue, because people are coming out, and we have to find a way to put them to work. So again, thank you for letting me just stop it for a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Beard. Okay, now we come to our question and answers part of our forum. When you come to the mic, you must say your name and then give your question. Allow them to answer and pass the mic on. It's not a back and forth. Thank you for recognizing and obeying the rules. Here you go.
Thank you. I hope Mayor Barrett didn't leave.
He did. It was just.
Oh, good. He's in the back.
Okay,
Good,
go
because I
ahead.
hope he
Your
can
name.
hear me. My name's Dawn Rablin. I'm here as a member of the community. I do work as a state public defender. I'm here to give a voice to a prior client of mine who 15 years ago he committed a second-degree sexual assault. He has gotten released. He got released Tuesday. He is an offender. I'd like to call him a community member. He is often the recipient of the scorn, of the barriers, and most recently of the City of Milwaukee's sex offender ordinance. As a result of this, he has nowhere in the City of Milwaukee where he can live. I have paid for a hotel for this man since his release on Tuesday. I don't say that to get your applause. I say it because this is ridiculous. He has nowhere.
Question or comment?
The solution is to live in his van at a park and ride. He doesn't have a van yet, but he's going to have our family Suburban by Monday. In 48 hours, he got a driver's license. He got a job. He got W-2 benefits. Mr. Penzie of Penzie Spice responded to my letter that I wrote him. I don't know Mr. Penzie. He got a job. What did DOC give him? They gave him a GPS. And they gave him his rules, and they gave him a bus pass. That is it. But because of the City of Ordinance, he has nowhere to live. I am told that they will reconsider it in the spring. The spring is not soon enough. He will die in a van at a park and ride this winter.
So is this a question?
This is
to
a
the
question.
panel?
What are
Thank
we
you.
going to do about this ordinance?
People who are re-entering, who are sex offenders.
Wait up, Lena.
With an ordinance that is.
Yes.
That's what you're asking?
Oh, you want to answer? Okay.
I'm very happy to answer this question, and it's a horrible situation. I agree with you, it's a horrible situation. And let me tell you how it came about. What the state law has said is that when a person commits a sexual offense, that they are to be returned to the county from which they come, or where the crime was committed, or where the victim is. And so what has happened, and this came before the city of Milwaukee in 2007, 2008, because we saw the suburbs passing ordinances that made it difficult for sexual offenders from those communities to reside in those communities. And so what happened on a de facto basis, again, when we're at the local level, it's not theory, it's what is actually happening. What was actually happening is that the city of Milwaukee became the place where all of the sexual offenders were sent.
Yes.
All right?
Overload.
So, because all the different suburbs were passing these ordinances saying, we don't want them here. And we begged and we begged and we begged the Department of Corrections to address this issue. And we got nothing. We got nothing. Because from my standpoint, they were more than willing to have the sexual offenders reside in this city.
Yes.
Finally, we said, okay, we're telling you, we're going to pass the same ordinance. So it wasn't as though we were leading the charge. We finally said, we're just not going to be the dumping ground
Yeah.
for all the sexual offenders. We're just not going to be the dumping ground for all the sexual offenders. And I'm sympathetic to what you're saying. I'm extremely sympathetic to what you're saying. And so we said, okay, just so you know what's coming, this is what's going to happen. So we passed the ordinance. So let me fast forward, because there was an event that occurred that underscored what's going on. I was at an event as mayor, and I was at an event for kids at Betty Bryn Museum. And as I was coming out, a TV reporter, as we call it in the business, ambushed me and said, I was just contacted from a woman whose son is getting out of the penal institution. And because of the city of Milwaukee ordinance, he has no place to live. What are you going to do about that? And I said, I honestly don't know what you're talking about. Let me find out. And so I called my office and said, what do you know about this? And nobody knew anything. And so I came back, and the reporter pressed me some more. And the reporter said, well, here, let me show you the criminal complaint. So the reporter showed me the criminal complaint, and it took me about 20 seconds to analyze it. And I said, well, this is exactly what the problem is. This offense took place in Oak Creek. And the defendant lives in Oak Creek. And Oak Creek has passed an ordinance that says that he who committed the crime in Oak Creek and was from Oak Creek, that he couldn't live there. And so her expectation is, well, then Milwaukee should take the person. And with all due respect, I believe that if someone is a resident of Milwaukee and commits a criminal offense, that we have a responsibility to take that person. Or if the offense was committed here, we have a responsibility to take that person. I accept that. That is the right thing to do. But to suggest for 1 minute that every other community has a right to ship their problems to us, I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. So I would love to work with you. I would love to work with you. And we've tried, and we've talked to Niel and others. And I'm telling you, you're right, it's real. And is it pretty? No, it's not pretty. But I'm going to fight for this city, and I'm going to try to make sure that those areas who believe that they are morally superior to us and are going to send us our problems are not morally superior to us. I don't buy it. I just don't buy it. So I think the district attorney wants to add something to Lena as well.
I'll just say very briefly, there is a solution. The solution is simply this: we can treat all offenders, even those that concern us the most, sex offenders, highest on the list. We all agree with that. We can treat them humanely and safely. What we need is to find a location that is safe. It's removed from the neighborhoods and parks and businesses. You can find a facility that you could safely transition these individuals. We can't do it because there is a law in place that prohibits Milwaukee County from developing a new residential treatment facility for sex offenders. That has to change. There are simple solutions. We've all indicated we're working very hard on this. We get this, and but I will also tell you, when we hold our community prosecution meetings and we have to release an offender back into the community is concerned about that. They're deeply concerned, and rightfully so. So there is a solution. Let's just get it done, quite frankly.
I think Lena wanted to add something.
I was gonna say something, but y'all had it.
Okay.
You did the first part, you did the second.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, we got a lot of people in line. You have to make your comment or your question brief so that they can address it, they may address it, and we can get through as many people as possible.
My name is Ms. Rose, and now DOC defines recidivism as committing a criminal offense, and it is my understanding that approximately almost 30% of recidivism is not always based on another crime, but on minor rules and infractions which should not initiate a jailing sentence. What do you think when it comes to eliminating the utilization of parole officers, caseworkers, social workers who deal with minor negatives and really incarcerate others when they have nothing to do with the criminal behavior and they miss, example, missing appointments, power control, and all that. Parole officers and any other action of a minor nature that deals more with personality interaction and not criminal action. So what's the use for the re-jailing of persons who have not committed a crime and that you're dealing with the parolee all the time, but you're never dealing with the people who are handling them?
Who would like to answer that?
So first of all, the solution to that issue is swift and certain revocations. So there was a small piece of swift and certain that was done last session that Representative Nygren authored. However, we still do need to deal with the probation and parole revocation component and what can be done, which items can we get some cooperation to move to. And then lastly, I think that there is a need and there has been some effort for training probation agents to do like was just spoken. So I'll pass the mic because I think that's the perfect place.
Yes, thank you very much. So we have seen a reduction in revocations over the last few years, and part of the reason for that is we've switched to a more analytical approach when it comes to deciding a response to a violation. We've gone away from just somebody's gut instinct on what to do when somebody violates the rules of supervision. We've moved to a data-driven system. We use what's called a violation staffing guide, which is a matrix that plots out in advance where certain behaviors lie on a scale of severity, and it compares that to their actuarial risk assessment scores to then put somebody in a grid. So not only does that achieve more appropriate responses to sanctions in conjunction with that proportionality concept that you addressed, it also provides for consistency around the state. So agents in Milwaukee County aren't doing something different from agents in Waukesha County, and so on and so forth. So we definitely recognize the issue, and we are making quite a bit of progress in the right direction, in my opinion.
Okay, your name and your question.
My name is Willie Weaver Bay. I'm a returning prisoner. I just got through doing 41 years. I've been out 6 months.
This is the real one, right?
Yeah, this is the real, I'm listening
Your
to all of this stuff. I got a question,
Okay.
and I'm gonna get to it. I know I don't have a lot of time. My question is for a guy like this lady's client who's I'm homeless. But I know how to make it because I educated myself. I re-educated myself. I'm an artist. I have an exhibit at King Commons Gallery right now.
Okay.
But what do you do for a man like me? I'm not from Milwaukee, but I was sent to Milwaukee through the federal system after 26 years. I was dumped off with a bus pass and $20. I don't have any family here. I don't know anyone here, but I'm here and I'm surviving. I work at the VA hospital right now in an IT program called intensive therapy. It's not really a job. It's a therapist program because I'm a veteran. So what do you do for a guy like me and a guy like this lady's client?
I'll take it.
And
Hold
this
it
is
up.
my picture.
Hold it up.
I just did this about homeless veterans, and
How much is that?
we'll talk about that. I ain't gonna take it.
Tell me because the
Yeah.
time's running out.
Okay, so
Who would like to address?
I want to address that too, and I'm sorry, I'm going to try not to keep taking the mic. But first of all, the gentleman brings up a point that is really important. The first is what happens in the federal system and what happens for individuals returning from the federal system and the state system are different. What we've talked about today is what's happening for returning in the state system and the county system. So that's a very good point of what he talks about. But I would argue, and I'm sorry that neither the mayor nor the county executive are here, but I'm certain that there are some individuals who can tweet them or text them. I believe that we need a division that says if the state, because we got them to do portfolios when people are returning from the state, and there are specific things that have to be done. I don't know what happens, I'm gonna be honest, if there's a portfolio for people returning from the feds. But when they return, there should be a division And this is courtesy of Shanielle McLeod, who has done the work with Clean Slate Wisconsin, and who came to me and said, Senator, what about this concept? And she is right on the money. There needs to be a division that grabs people, whether they're coming from the federal or the state or the county system, that confirms that that checklist has been done, that the housing is addressed, that the job issue is addressed, that they got an ID, that they got all those pieces. And that should be local. And we don't have that right now.
So the short answer is Milwaukee is currently engaged in an effort to end homelessness, and it's designed specifically, and this has been at the county level. So I'm not sure what the gentleman went. We'll connect you with county services. We've already begun this process. It's called Housing First, which interestingly enough, it's a principle. It says that regardless of why you are homeless, and it's often because you're suffering from mental illness and you have substance abuse issues and you have a criminal record, anything of that nature. In the past, they would make you get services first before you could qualify for the housing. We're going to change that completely. We're already changing it. I just spoke to the county executive this morning. They've already placed 80 individuals who were in homeless shelters. They've already got them in stable long-term housing, and then we build the services around them. We get you housing first, and then we find out any other services you need. That's critical. And so we're already launched into that. It's been done in other cities, and our aspiration is unequivocal. We're going to end homelessness in Milwaukee.
Next, your name and your question or comment.
My name is Christian Eichenlaub. I'm another one of the public defenders here, and I'm one of the fighters. I've got a couple quick comments and then two questions. The first is that when you look around the room and see a lot of people that are vying for elective office here, if they ask you for your commitment to their campaigns, I think the smart question to respond with is, are you going to commit to continuing to be involved here? Because we see a lot of people running for office. We see a lot of judges running for office. We see very few judges who are elected here, and all of them are elected. Secondly, I would just I was hoping to put this to Executive Abele, because we heard about two systems in our county, the Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility and the House of Correction. I was going to toss him a softball about asking about what's going on at the Criminal Justice Facility, which is the third in our county. I'm certain that District Attorney Chisholm could probably speak to that. But I would also then challenge our friend from the Department of Correction, if we are trying to make sure that people are being allowed opportunities for reentry and allowed respect and given dignity through work and through training, would it not be better to, for yourself and for the people that work for you, stop calling them offenders to their face?
Yeah, that is.
Could you stand up, please?
Sure. Like Senator Taylor mentioned, this is an ongoing discussion. I use the term offender. I'm never comfortable with it. I like to use clients more so than offender. But right now, that's what kind of it's generated from statutory language. So there might need to be some larger changes when it comes to the concept of moving away from the word offender. Do you want to say anything else, Dr. Jensen?
I think in my remarks this morning, I moved between the word offender and people returning to the community. And I think that this labeling is an issue, and I will take it back and discuss it with the executive team in the Department of Corrections. It is in statute, I believe.
It is not. Oh, it's not? Is it in administrative code? Anyway.
Next. One question or comment, and keep it simple.
Joel Wenger, Project Return, MICA, Transitional Jobs Collaborative, and so on. The issue of crimeless revocations has been mentioned, and what we need to realize is that there are 4,000 people who get sent back to prison every year for a crimeless rule violation, and this is unconscionable. Minnesota has a law that says that you cannot send somebody back and revoke their sentence unless they have committed a new crime, have community sanctions. Now, the DOC is getting by right now and saying, oh, we've got alternatives to revocation. We send them to the Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility, and we give them a program there, and that's an alternative. And my challenge to the correctional, the supervision folks, and to the DOC is to face the facts that sending a person to the Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility for a program there, they wait 6 months, they get the program, they're there for 9, 12 months in a place that is like a maximum in terms of the surroundings, and Minnesota has a rule that says you can't do that. You have sanctions in the community. Now, I recognize, my question is, can't the DOC, before the legislature passes a law that says you can't do this, can't the DOC begin to do this even without the law? You've got the power to do it.
Thank you.
So when I spoke earlier about the Alternative to Revocation program at the Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility, that's a small piece of the larger puzzle of options that we offer individuals before we move to that level. And it goes back to a little bit about the concept I spoke to using that staffing guide and making sure that we're meshing the behaviors with their actuarial scores and their offense history. Like I indicated, we have over $6.2 million worth of programming available in the community. A lot of those programs are utilized in conjunction with an alternative to revocation agreement. So somebody may have multiple opportunities to address their criminogenic needs in a community setting before we ever would consider putting them in a program that would remove them from the community for 9 months. I think where I want to focus my staff is making sure that those $6.2 million of programs that we sponsor are evidence-based, are effective, are required to show us that they're doing what we're paying them to do, and that when we do sort of follow-up conversations with the offenders that, I'm going to say clients, sorry. When we talk to the men and women that go through the program, they give us the feedback we want to hear, that yes, the counselors believed in me, yes, I was rewarded for doing good things, yes, my agent was involved and was there for the staffings and was my biggest cheerleader throughout the program. So again, I agree with the concept that we don't want to put somebody in a program that keeps them from the community for 9 months.
So this gets to the heart of the issue of redesigning our concept of community corrections. So what's different in Minnesota, and Joe would acknowledge this, is that in Minnesota they have a law also that says that their counties can only send so many people to the state prison system to begin with. Once they go past a certain number, they have to pay for it. So as a consequence, they have a built-in incentive to develop a capacity at the community level to handle their cases at the community level before it. So only the highest risk, worst offenders get sent into this. And they adopted that in 1972. So you can see the built-in incentives. And that's why I'm talking about, let's be open to rethinking. And let's also, there are people representing incredible community entities that are willing to work with young men, young women, offenders coming back into it. And we've invested billions and billions, hundreds of billions into the incarceration system. We're not going to reverse engineer this thing overnight. If we're going to do it effectively, we have to invest money into the resources that allow us to safely and effectively treat people in our community. When they've committed offenses, they're still held accountable, but we just do it in ways that are actually more effective and keep them in the community so they can take care of their families and they can maintain the integrity of the family, which leads to the integrity of a neighborhood, which leads to the integrity of the city. And that's what we're talking about reimagining.
To piggyback on what John just said, the takeaway I would ask for the department is there is a disconnect between what programs may exist in the community that are not the ordinary ones that people normally know, where there may be able to be some supports. And so agents need to know that in order to feel comfortable to use that. Because part of what I think happens is there is some change in the system. And I hear that, I see that, I know that. The problem is the number of individuals who get to experience that piece, that sliver, hasn't grown to be the number of people who are returning. And so there is a need to be able to, I think it's been said, to scale, for it to go to scale. You know, I don't always receive that, because part of the issue is if there isn't a will to contract with people who are in the community who can provide those issues that help, then that's where the disconnect happens. So a lot of people may not get those alternative options that exist because that's so narrow, and instead of the floodgate, for lack of a better word, being open for other options.
Thank you, Senator Taylor. And next, we need your name and your question. Make it brief.
Hi, I'm Chris Amity from the American Civil Liberties Union of Wisconsin. I'm going to continue on the theme of crimeless revocation. Really, reducing over-incarceration, reentry isn't going to work as long as we have this serious issue of high numbers of crimeless revocations. But I don't want to dump on the department right now. They've had a little bit of that already. Rather, I want to ask about the role of the Milwaukee Police Department in terms of crimeless revocations. Because the police department has like 200,000 plus officer-initiated stops, mostly on the north side every year. And they're not, lots of innocent people are getting stopped, but I can tell you that people who are recent returnees are getting stopped and targeted for these stops, I believe. So as long as the police keep up that rate of saturation patrolling and stops and racial profiling, etc., how can we cut down on crimeless revocation?
Thank you.
No, I'm not speaking for the Milwaukee Police Department. What I will indicate is a core component of our community prosecution program is a component called MCOR. It's the Collaborative Offender Reentry Program. And what that is designed to do is when people are coming back into the community, it's twofold. It's to identify, what their risks and needs are, and that's done right at the local level. It's to make the police officers, the prosecutors, the members of the community familiar with that person, and to try to direct them into resources so that they're held accountable. That's done both on a juvenile side in some select districts, but it's done, I think, in 6 of our 7 districts right now. That is aimed at getting directly at what you're talking about. Now, the legislature passed a law recently that would allow, for example, law enforcement to ask for police to accompany them for search warrant type purposes and things like that. I will tell you, I think it is rarely ever used. I'm just telling you right now, that's been my experience. The Department of Corrections is generally taking the position that they don't want that presence except when there's a defined risk associated with it. So that's on the plus side. But there's no question that we have to go further in, again, educating everybody in the system about things like collateral consequences, this is a significant one. I will just indicate just briefly, we just shut down the entire criminal justice system about 2 weeks ago. And this is actually the second time in 2 years that we've done this to address specific issues related to disparities in our system, racial disparities in our system, and we're taking this issue seriously, and this is a component of that we're aware of, and we're trying to address it through things like that.
Ms. McLeod, this is a dynamic sister. Last weekend, she was busy with the Fatherhood Initiative program, and so many came to see her addressing what we're talking about now.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Like they both said, my name is Niel McLeod. I'm the executive director of an organization called Clean Slate Milwaukee, which is a reentry organization that promotes expungement and second chances for people that have made mistakes in their past. I got 2 questions, and I just want to make a comment. My first question is a successful reentry really, seriously a priority for Wisconsin, considering Wisconsin and its staff members depend so heavily on the prison system, and its staff members, the COs, the POs, and the northern counties where their prisons is their only economic support. So is it really a priority? I really want to know, and that question is for anybody who can answer that. The second question is.
We're supposed to be out of here.
Okay. Well, can I just make my comment then?
Yes, hurry up.
Okay, so I just want to My comment is, oh, you just threw me off. I just want to say this. If you really want to help, in my opinion, I mean, seriously want to help, you will make people that have records a protected class, because right now when it comes to housing, they are an unprotected class on a federal and a state level. There is no way to discriminate for housing and really employment discrimination. If you have a felony conviction, and particularly because they're an unprotected class. And if you will change the policies in higher education and enforce fair housing and fair hiring for people to have records, and stop playing politics with people's personal advancement.
I want to answer that. I just want to say that we are over at 11, but we've had an illustrious panel. No, we're not over. That's what I'm going to say. I got justices telling me to. The gentleman in back of the young lady in the orange will be the last speaker. We will have a brief statement or a brief comment, or else we're just going to take them all and then they can answer them all and move along.
Who will?
Just briefly, I just want to commend the work that's being done on the expungement side. We just held a panel that was hosted by your groups, and it was phenomenal. I mean, it was really good. Yes, yeah. But and so what you're doing is important. It's education, right? So that the more people know about it, and the more people in the system know about it, the more effective that process is going to become. So thank you.
I just want to say to clean the slate, Earl Buford and I had Ms. McLeod at our Milwaukee Reentry Network meeting just a couple of weeks ago, and we committed that we are going to look at this across the Milwaukee community and see what we can do.
Amen. Next. All right.
Hi, my name is Annette Hartpole. I'm a volunteer with the NAACP Milwaukee Branch Criminal Justice Committee. Just heard a presentation by Mark Rice, a member of MICA and Expo, Ex-Prisoners Offending, along with Nina Rodriguez out of Madison. And question is, anyone of the Niel Thoreson or anyone on the panel open to a community advisory board to oversee crimeless revocation decisions? Someone might accept a job offer before getting the approval of their parole officer, and then they're sent back. That is not, that's not being compassionate. Or their GPS monitor fails to work. That's out of their control, and yet they're sent back. So the question is, can we create a community advisory board that will, in conjunction with the administrative law judges, be able to consider the request of the probation or parole officer's decision to send back? Maybe the decision is not to send them back because there are wraparound programs. So that's the question.
Yeah, I've actually thought about that a lot myself. When I was in college, I volunteered for a program with juveniles, and it was that same sort of model where there was a 3-panel team from the community that heard how somebody adjusted to supervision and offered commentary in response to violations and things like that. And I think there might be a role for that in the adult system. Sylvia and I were just kind of nodding our heads a little bit because I believe that there is a place for that as far as what we're doing with the clients that we supervise.
I think that, again, that's reimagining how we do the business. There are good models for that. That's one of the things that's come out of the executive session on community corrections. I've heard from sheriffs and from corrections leaders around the country, and some of them have exactly that concept. They have the direct community involvement in the revocation decision. It's different, and remember, those systems are generally operated at the county level. Ours is operated at the state level. So that creates a complication, but I don't think it's insurmountable.
Thank you. Next. Your name and question.
Thank you. I'm Judge Michelle Havas. I'm going to direct my question after giving you just a little bit. I've worked with the system since 1989. I worked in the domestic violence unit at the DA's office. I worked in probation and parole with drug offenders in the 90s. I worked back at the DA's office when I came back, and I worked out at children's court. Now I'm in misdemeanor court. And it's the same problems we're seeing. My question for Dr. Jackson and Chief Thoreson, what is being done to treat the trauma that is causing this? The symptoms that we're seeing is the homelessness and being not employed and not having your education. But the cause, I think, is the trauma that came to these little kids as they were coming up, and they were looking at, and if we don't treat that trauma, we can treat the symptoms all we want, and we may save some, and that would be great. But we won't be able to grab them all. What is being done when they're in prison to treat that trauma to make it easier once they're out?
That is an excellent question. I can say two things to that. We have a grant from the Department of Health Services to look at trauma at Chichita Correctional Institution for the women. So that process is underway thanks to some targeted funding. But the other thing that we're doing, I mentioned the Compass assessment tool. We are now looking at adding the ACE that I think District Attorney referenced earlier in his remarks, the Adverse Childhood Experiences tool to our assessment menu at intake. So my hope in the next year that tool will be there, because then it'll educate the people who are doing the assessment process that this is a need, this is something that we have to address. So it is on our radar, and I think we're going to go down that road.
Good.
Yeah, and I'll also refer again to the MacArthur grant. So we're focusing on two issues. The two issues are dramatically changing the way we deal with the mentally ill who are encountered by the criminal justice system. And our goal is to keep the mentally ill completely out of the criminal justice system. So that's the first thing. And related to that then is we want to, what people should know as well, as part of the evidence-based decision-making process and through the largesse of the county, we now universally screen. That means that everybody that's arrested is at least given the opportunity, about 95% of them do it, to be screened. And what are they screened for? They're screened for both risk and need. And then we try to make our determinations on what we do with the individual based on that screening. What we would love to do with the MacArthur grant is now add another tool. And there's nothing we're going to pull off the shelf, but we'd be the first people in the country to do it, quite frankly. But again, everybody that comes into contact with the system, let's also screen them for trauma. Let's find out what in effect their ACE score. ACE is Adverse Childhood Experience. Let's find out what their score is. It may not change our decision on what we do with the person, but it's certainly much better inform what we do with that person, including our victims. And again, that directs me back to what we're doing with Sojourner Family Peace, which is, again, the national model that finally gets that if we're going to change for the future, we got to change what we're doing right now with families exposed to violence. That's absolutely critical.
An MCM production.